Hi, Jeff Rhodes here with another video on Microsoft 365, and today we're going to talk about communicating between email and Power Automate and take some data out of the email and put it into a SharePoint list. And I started on the company website here because before Platte Canyon we really focused on Microsoft 365 products. We had really more than a decade of writing products in the e-learning and before that the computer-based training space. And part of that was learning management systems, first just in a product called Toolbook and then generally, and we still have one of those around called Tracker.net, which uses the SCORM standard, which is a JavaScript kind of communicating between the training and the learning management system to keep track of the student's progress, the score, and the time, and so forth. And the reason I bring all this up is one of our old customers reached out recently and had a situation where the budget didn't allow for any kind of learning management system, but he still wanted to track some data. And I suggested, well, if you can get the learning or the content to send an email, then you could work with the email from there, which I was picturing kind of a manual thing to read the email. But then I thought, well, it'd be pretty cool if we use Power Automate to parse out that email, and I thought I'd do an example just to show how you might do it. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. First thing I needed, because I didn't want to try to do all this in an actual authoring tool, I just fired up Visual Studio and did a quick ASP.NET web form, and you kind of see, not the prettiest thing, but I've got the completion date and first and last name, minutes, and score, and we'll send the email out. And if I go to source, we use the jQuery and the jQuery UI library. So lots of information online on that, but you'll see I've got a date picker and two spinners here. So let's go ahead and fire that up and let's send the first email. And actually, just while that's firing up, let me go back to our SharePoint list, and then I'll come back to that. So I built a SharePoint list. If I go to details here, just so we can see it, I've got the same kind of, or the exact same columns, first name, last name, completion date, minutes spent. Notice minutes spent and score are numeric columns, completion date's a date. And then I added status just to kind of show you that you can add other columns that are not in your data. In this case, it defaults to new with the idea that you could change it to validated if maybe after you reviewed the data, made sure it was okay or something like that. So let's see if I can go back to my completion email. Notice it says not secure since I'm in localhost here, which is the web server on my machine, so it doesn't have a certificate, an SSL certificate. So I can come in here, notice I can pick the date, that's the jQuery UI. I've been testing this with Paul McCartney since I'm going to the Paul McCartney concert this weekend, so that should be pretty cool. And here's a spinner, I default to 60, but we'll just say this was 55 and test score, I'll say 85 here. He has a song called 1985 that I'll reference there. And then I'm going to send the completion results. And I put a breakpoint in here. Let me see if I can get rid of, well, that's where I'll just move that over a little bit. And what I'm doing is handling the button click. So I won't spend a lot of data, but a lot of time on this. But I'm checking to make sure that's a numeric value. And then I'm appending a string, and notice this separator string has two pipes on the end. So I'm grabbing the first name box text, see as Paul, and then it says the last name should say McCartney, and so forth. So doing that, so getting that all together. And then I'll get to this in a minute. You'll see it in the email, but one of the challenges of this type of solution is you want to make sure that you're protected against any kind of hacking or whatever. And this isn't the absolute perfect one, but it's certainly better than nothing. What I needed to do is find a way to encode the data, a hash we often call it, on both the .NET side, but also that I could recreate on the Power Automate side. So I pulled up Copilot to help on that, and Copilot suggested going to base 64s, which is kind of cool. So that's what's going on here. So what I'm encoding, URL encoding, kind of putting the %20s and things like that in there. And then it has a method that I can convert it to a base 64 string, and has this get bytes thing. So if I look at what that variable looks like, see, it's a bunch of text here. So the idea is that it's encoded. I'm going to send this value as along with it, and then on the Power Automate side, I'm going to do my own calculations, make sure that matches. And in this video, we're going to go ahead and try to send a bogus email changing the score and make sure that it fails in that case. And then I've got a separate method, send status completion email. So I'm going to jump into that. Oh, I went past it, actually. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'll show you the thing. I should have hit the other function key. But what I do is I do a bunch of stuff that's stored in our web config file that's got the server name and the credentials and all that kind of stuff there. But the good part is that I'm sending it with this subject. You'll see how it's got all these pipes on it. And then I'm going ahead and send the body text, and then I send that hash code as a special line that says hash equals. So the 0 means body text goes in there and hash code goes into the 1. And then I send the email. And if we go back, you'll see it said, oh, actually I didn't let it finish yet. So let me, because I'm still up on that line up here. So I'll just hit F5 and let it finish. There we go. And it says submission successful. So that's the first part. So I'm going to watch that email. It looks like it actually already came in over here. Actually, that was a previous one. So let me let that fire up for a second. And we'll get the most current email. So I'm going to pause for just a second. All right, email's here. Let me open it up. Bring it over to this side. Okay, so you see, so I'm sending it from myself to myself, and then there's things. So first name equals Paul, 2 pipes. Last name is McCartney. There's the score, and here's this hash that we're talking about all the way to there. So let's go over to Power Automate, see if it's fired off yet. So I go over here and let me refresh this page. So I'm not going to build this one from scratch because it takes 20 plus minutes to get all the variables in there and so forth. Oops, we're not going to re-authenticate some old ones. There we go. So we had one 1 minute ago. So let's go ahead and actually let's go look at the list first, see if it worked. So let me reload. There we go. So you see it grab Paul McCartney, completion date, minutes spent, score, and the status, as I mentioned, is the default of new. So that's good. So let me go in and look at the data, and then I'll come back in here in the and we'll look at it in debug mode. And actually, when I think about it, let's go look at it in debug mode for a second, and then I'll come through, because there's something that I want to show you that makes sense, better sense if I do it. So let me come over here and click on the new email itself. Let me get away from that. So what I want to do to look at the email is I want to go to the outputs of this, which gives me everything about the email. And then let me scroll down a little bit and go to the body. And I'm just going to go to the end and copy that, and we'll put that into Notepad real quick. I've got an empty Notepad here. And I can get rid of the quotes. But what I really want to point out, so notice how it reads all this, but it's got all this stuff at the end. And what these are carriage return line feeds. So when I first set this up, it didn't work right because I've got this extra stuff in here. So what I need to do, you'll see in the code, is I need to trim off that, because basically what we want to do is we want to grab, first thing we want to do is we want to read this hash up to right there, store it in a variable. We want to get rid of it and then make our own base 64 hash of basically this part, because that includes the, because it's got those afterwards up to that spot. Well, without the H, didn't quite, there we go. So you want a hash of that. We want to make sure that those match, and that will tell us that the data hasn't been tampered with. So from there, let's go back, let's get out of this, and I'll go in and show you so I can show you the code. But a little bit easier to see it there in the debugging spot. All right, so when a new email arrives, now if you were doing this yourself, you'd almost certainly make this an org box. So there's a separate connector that just says when a shared mailbox or a new email arrives in a shared mailbox, use that instead. But I want to do it on my own, so that's my own account that just came into. The from is very important. I want to, in a minute, I'm going to try to spoof it and change one of the data. So I needed this to be from the email I could send from. But another level of security, you can just make sure that it comes from, you know, some email that's harder to spoof and you know, that's hidden in some way. So this could be admin or training results at or something like that. And then there's that subject filter. So if it comes in, anything that comes in from a different, from the same from into the same to, but then not that same subject, then it won't trigger it. So we, you know, have something pretty unique, which is why we have all those pipes on there. And then we want to do is, I've got a variable called var body text, and what we do is we grab the body. So this part is the body, and the way you get to that is go to dynamic content and click body here. And then this is how we get rid of those carriage return line feeds. You can find that by searching. You decode, and then you put the string in there. That's the URL encoded version of the carriage return line feed, that /r/n. So when I do that, it comes out and gets rid of that stuff at the end of it, which is great because we don't want that. And then what we do is we grab the hash from the body. So we're using that variable, the var text, and then we split on hash equals. So let's go back to the thing for a minute. So if we split on this, what it does is give us an array with all of this part in the first element, and then all of this, remember we already got rid of these /r's bit at the end, will be in the second element, which is the last one, since there's only two. So that's how we get the split, turns it into the array, the last gives us the last element. So that will give us our hash that we want. And then what we want to do is calculate it as well. So this is a little convoluted, but basically the same thing we had in .NET here. Okay, so again, we're going to split the var tax on the hash. Okay, we're going to do the first part of it, okay, which gives us all right, I'm back. I got myself confused for a minute because I was expecting this to be the last instead of first, but now I remember what I'm doing here. So anyway, we got this variable, that's the body text. We again split on the hash, but we're getting the first, so we want the text at the beginning. So just the opposite of what we were just doing. So we give, that will give us all the text before the hash equals, which is what we want to encode. And so we trim it just in case there's any extra spaces or anything. And then we encode it as a URI, and then it has a base 64 method. So if everything works right, it gives us this number just like that, or this string, this big long letter thing. But again, if anything had changed, it wouldn't give us the same one. All right, so that's the most complicated part. Then we have a variable, is it authenticated? And we're basically just using the equals method and say, okay, the hash value from the email, is it equal to the hash value that we calculate? So that'll be a true or false. And you see that's a Boolean variable. And then I just set up some variables for later. So we're going to have an array, the body array, because what we're going to do when we get to it is that's why we have all these pipes in here. So when we split on this, it will give us first name equals Paul as one value, last name equals McCartney, and then as you might imagine with the equals, then we'll split again in a loop to get the last name in one element and the McCartney in another, so we can grab the McCartney bit. So a whole lot of splitting and arrays going on here. So we got the body array, we got the line array, which is that one which will be last name equals McCartney when we split that out. And then again, since we don't really have dynamic variables here, I need to make a variable for each one. So I got first name, last name, completion date, and those are all strings. And then I've got minutes spent, I've got as a float, because technically that could be like 87.5, even though I didn't do that in my sample. And same with the score. So those could both have decimals on it. So then we do conditions, so I'll expand that. And so all we're doing is say, is var authenticated equal to true? So if it's false, we just don't do anything. We just skip it. We could send like a notification email saying that we're getting bogus data, somebody's attacking us or whatever. But right now I've just skipped it. And so if it's true, then I set up that var body array. So as you mentioned, we just put on the variables and then we decode it just to make sure, just to be on the safe side, and we put the two pipes in there. So again, if we go back here, that will give us an array that this will be the first element, this will be the second, this will be the third, and then so forth. So, there'll be, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. And we'll go back and look at this in the debug in a minute. And then we loop through each element. So we'll select an output. So this will run 5 times in our example. Okay. And then we check for blank lines just because it's possible we got a blank line in there somewhere. And if we just want to make sure, because we'll get an error there. So in this example, we don't really need it, but I just put that in to be on the safe side. And so if it's not equal to blank so that it has a value, now we're going to set the individual line. So as I mentioned, now we're going to get the item and we're going to split on the equals sign. So again, not to beat it to death, but now we're going to have a single array where, well, if we take the first one, that'll be the first element, this will be the second element. And so what we want is the Paul part of that. And so now we're going to do a switch. I've named it set variable values, but we're going to grab it on the first element. So that'll be last name, first name, completion date, score, minutes, that kind of thing. So we're going to check which one, and then we have a case for each one. So these are all basically the same. Whoops, let me extend that a little bit. There you go. So we're going to do the case, and this is where I like to copy and paste. So I come in and paste first name there and say equals first name, because it needs to match on the case and stuff as well. So if some of this is lowercase, some of this uppercase, not going to work. But all these are pretty much the same. If we get to the first name, then we set our var first name, and each one of those the same. Last of the array. Because remember, the first one is first name, and the last one is Paul in this case. So we're going to go through and do that. So we got last name, completion date. And the completion date works as a string because it was smart enough to do it. The minutes spent and the score, we need to make sure we convert that to a number. So we, instead of just saying last of that variable, we say the float there, and that's where it allows it to be a numeric. And the way this comes up is when we go to write this to SharePoint, if it's a string variable, which means we didn't have this float in there, then it doesn't even show up as us to be able to select it. It's smart enough to say, hey, if you're going to put it into a numeric SharePoint column, then we need the variable needs to be defined as a number, so either a number or a float. And then when we set the value, we got to use this float command to make sure it can be converted. So that's good. It keeps you from having kind of weird errors. So we do that, and then under the default, I don't have anything because I want to handle all of those things. So let's collapse this a little bit just so we can, oops, actually I collapsed it a little too far, but that's okay. Because I wanted to collapse the loop through array. That's a little bit better. There we go. So we get the var body, we loop through the array, and now we have all our variables set. And so our last one is create item. So we select that training results list, and then, whoops, we go ahead and use our variables. So that's the part I was talking about, like minutes spent. When I come in here and select it, only those two variables that are shown as numbers in some way show up. I can't put like var last name in there or anything. So we come in and set the first name, last name, completion date, minutes spent, score, and then the status, just, we could change the value there just manually, but we're just leaving it at its default. All right, so let's come back and look at it one more time in the debug mode just so we can verify that those are the same, that the hashes are the same. So if I come over here and look at the output, notice the value of the hash. Notice it ends with those two equal signs. And then if I go to our calculated hash, same thing. Let's go look there. It's the same value. And so if we look at the is authenticated, oops, come on, that comes through as true. And let's see, let's go through here a little bit. So we get, let's look at that var body array for a minute in case it was a little hard to visualize. See how it's got each of those on its same line. That's what I was talking about. Notice that it puts the hash still in there because it's there, but we didn't have a case for that, so we don't do anything with that hash. So we don't need to worry about that. And then if we loop through the array and loop through 6 times, we talked about 5, but we skipped the hash one. But if I come in here, check for the blank line, let's just look at that line array just so we can see what it looks like. Again, first name is one, Paul is another. So I probably beat that to death, but hopefully that makes sense. And then we come through at the end and we wrote that to SharePoint. All right, so let's go back to the email for a minute. And let's see if we can test this. Oops. There we go. So I'm going to reply all to this. And I'm going to change this to come from that email. I need to get rid of the reply, get rid of all this. And let's try to change our score to 100. Again, that's why I did. Oh, and it's got some, doesn't really matter about these blank lines, but I'll get rid of them. All right, so let's send that. Oh, actually, need to send that. That's to the wrong one, so let me send it to, make sure I send it to that one. There we go. And we'll send it. Let's go back, Power Automate, and see if we can flag that and see what happens. So I'll reload this. And I'm going to pause for just a second because it could take 30 seconds or so. All right, well, I'm back. It just popped up there. So see, it says 11 seconds ago. So let's go ahead and see what happened. So we got the var hash from the email. So let's grab that, and I'll just put that into Notepad. Oops. Just grab that whole line. So I'll get rid of this one from before. We'll put that in like that. And then let's do the var hash calculated. And we can already see this at the end here didn't match. Okay, so some of it matched, but the whole right at the end here it didn't. And looks like it's kind of about the same, you know, up through this part, but definitely towards the end there when we got to the score. So let's go see what it did. So if we go to var is authenticated, that says false. So that's good. So if we look at the rest of this, it will come through, say continue if authentic. Whoops, not that one I didn't want. And you see it, this means it didn't go down that one, it went down the false one, which had no action. So nothing happened. If we go back, we'll, if we reload this, it should not have put any more data. So let's do one more of these and we'll call it a day. So let's put a new one in here. We'll stick with our Beatles theme. So let's say Ringo Starr. We'll say he spent an hour, he got 90. Oops, I'll go ahead and just continue. We don't need to go through all that again. Let's reload that. See if it's come yet. If not, I'll pause for a second. All right, let me pause. All right, you see it's actually running as we speak, so it might be done by the time we click on it. So it came through here. I won't check all the variables. Let's just see if it got authenticated. Whoops. Let's expand that. Yep, went through, created the item. Let's see if I reload this list. There we go, we got Ringo, has our new score. I'll show you the new email. There it goes, Ringo Starr, and so forth. So about a half an hour. Hope that was helpful. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't. If you have any ideas for videos that you'd like to see, just leave me a comment and we'll put it on the list. Thanks and have a great day.